Right, Wayne, we're live. We're live on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and possibly Facebook. I don't know if it's linked up with Facebook yet, but it's due to over the next couple of weeks at some point. So we may be live on Facebook. And I was just starting to tell Wayne a story before I hit go live. So I've gone and bought myself this new fancy 1080p camera for doing the podcast stuff. In the same week that I've got awful hay fever, so you can literally see every bag on my face and it looks like I've been crying. And then this morning I was due at the hairdresser's and I was convinced it was 11 o'clock. And at 10 o'clock, 10 past 10, I got a phone call saying, "Chris, where are you?" So I've not had my beard and haircut as well. And you can see every like grey hair in full 1080p HD. So I apologize to everyone watching for that. So before we jump into a bit more about Wayne and what Wayne does, which is really cool, and I know I've got a lot of EdTech watchers and people in schools, and Matt's watching as well. I'll just do the usual pre-stuff that I usually get across for people who are watching for the first time. So a little bit about the podcast. It started as a newsletter. I wanted something that gave me a bit of a release from the day-to-day pains of being a founder in the EdTech space, or in any space really, I guess. And I started writing a newsletter. I then got a bit of pressure from people who were saying, "I don't digest information in this way. Is there any way you could do something video related?" And I thought that'd be quite hard, me reading through a newsletter. So I decided to release the podcast. So the podcast is designed to spotlight people who would usually appear in the newsletter, what they do, what their product is, or what their software is, and how it supports schools. So that's how the podcast started. You can find us on LinkedIn. There is a Facebook page that I'll share in the comments. And we are also on YouTube. So if you go across to YouTube, there's a load of content on there. So that content is not just podcast related as well. There's some product stuff. There's some data analysis stuff for people who work in schools and want to know how to calculate Progress 8 and all that jazz. So that's what the podcast is and what it's designed to do. Today I've got Wayne Harrison with me. Wayne, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what it is you do?
Yeah, of course I can. I'm Wayne Harrison. I'm co-founder of WhatWorked Education. First of all, I'm a former teacher. So I taught for a number of years in the northeast of England, teaching science. And then when I left, I was very fortunate to get a scholarship to go to Durham University to do an MA in research methods and then PhD, which looked at evidence, basically building micro trials and a cumulative evidence base. So that's a bit of background. I have 2 young daughters and I enjoy fishing in my spare time when I do get a bit of spare time.
I've got 2 young daughters as well. I don't know if we've had this conversation. And I think I got 2 young daughters because I sold all my fishing gear when I met I decided to spend more time with her than fishing. So I sold all my gear and, you know, fast forward a few years later, we've got 2 daughters as well. So you've done well to keep the fishing up.
Fantastic.
We can pick up on that later.
Brilliant.
So,
sorry, go on.
Sorry, go on, Wayne, you go.
No, that's okay. Go on. I'll let you go.
Oh, there was a bit of a delay then.
Yes.
So I've worked in education EdTech for 25 years now, quarter of a century. Sounds awful when you put it that way. And I've always been a big advocate of liaising with schools and educators when building out an offer or a service or a piece of software. And that's usually served us really well. One thing that I've always thought was the holy grail was evidence-based research that you could share with prospective customers and current customers. So when we first spoke, I was like, you guys are definitely onto something here. And I looked at your website and it says, helping to find out what works in education. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about how you do that?
Yeah, so first of all, what we do at WhatWorked Education is we support schools and EdTech to try and find out what works. And it goes back to what do we mean by evidence? And and a lot of people in schools will be aware of the Education Endowment Foundation with the Teach and Learn Toolkit. That it's been around now for about 14 years. And when I trained as a teacher, the word evidence was hardly used. Over the last 20 years, we're becoming more an evidence-based and informed profession with the teachers coming through. And when the way I look at this is it's pretty straightforward. Most things which you will have, particularly with EdTech, they will say they've got evidence through a case study, or they'll have evidence of, they might have a pre-test and a post-test. And what that generally is it's a single group. So you don't have anything to compare it with. So you have a group of students who you might give a pre-test for, they will get the intervention, which is the EdTech products, and then they'll have a post-test. And quite often what you see on EdTech websites is, oh, we've made an improvement of like 30%, and oh, isn't our product absolutely amazing? But when you look at this from an evidence point of view, that has real weaknesses from a research design, in that you don't actually have anything to compare it with. So you might actually find, which often happens, students get better over time anyway. So you have temporal change in that they might improve anyway. And often what will often happen is the pre-test they'll use for the post-test. So students might just be familiar with that assessment. Yeah. Or there might be other things that's happening inside the school that is helping for that improvement. It might not just be down to the EdTech. And the way you can get around that is by having a control group. So this is what the Education Endowment Foundation do with their large trials. They'll set up a large-scale randomized controlled trial where there's a comparator group that's set up so that you have the intervention delivered in one group and then not the other. So what we do, what worked is we basically help set up small-scale RCTs. So these are not the large-scale ones. The average cost of a large-scale RCT is £500,000. It often takes a few years to do. And what we do with EdTech is we set up small-scale RCTs. What I mean by an RCT is a randomized controlled trial, so that we have a comparator group which is created, and then we randomize either individual or class level to students receiving the intervention. And then they'll do that over a short period of time, which could be 6 to 12 weeks. And then at the end of that, the students who don't receive it then get access to it. So you're only withholding it for a very small period of time, if that makes sense. So that's from the ethical point of view. But what it does do, it creates a comparator group that so you can actually see how does it actually work in that school. And so that's what we're doing at WhatWorked, is that we support basically teachers to run their own small-scale RCTs. I'll show you a platform that we've done off our learnings over the last 3 years on how to do this. And then we've also opened this up for EdTech companies for a private space to basically test how the intervention's working before they even consider going for a large-scale RCT, which might cost a lot more money. So that's what we do.
Yeah, I can definitely see value for. I've got my EdTech hat on, and I have been that guy who's been guilty of using a case study as evidence, because it's the only evidence we've got, and really it's an interview. So I can definitely see how this could have helped me in the past in my EdTech businesses. I never really thought of it from a school point of view and a MAT point of view as well, because MATs will have their own interventions, won't they? And schools will have their own interventions, and they need to convince everyone that they work. So.
Well, it's also what doesn't work, because that's something that's often not considered, because I don't know, this is what it's hard to get my head around when I first started learning about research. Is anything you go into, whether it's life, you want to go in the plane, a lift, you want to go have medicine, you would always test something before it goes through rigorous testing before it's released onto the market. With EdTech, anyone can pretty much come up with a concept, can then release it, and if it gets scale, it can scale without actually having any potential impact. It could be positive, it could be negative, it might have no impact, but you're wasting time and resources. And I don't know whether it's because it's not an immediate, you will die. For example, if a lift fell, test it, you would die straight away, but it's still a negative impact that's happening on these students. And that's one of the things that I'm passionate about, is that we need to test things to see if they show promise before you actually release them, because resources in schools are getting tighter. And schools are going to have to start making more evidence-based decisions around what they will purchase into their schools. So if you're an EdTech company and you can show that your intervention or your product is showing promise and build evidence along the way, then it puts you in a stronger position as an EdTech company.
Yeah, it feels like it's ethically the right thing to do as well. We're talking about public money here, aren't we? And we've got teachers who are overworked and money that's that's drying up more than it's ever dried up before. So it feels like it might be the ethical thing to do as well, to make sure that we're not rolling something out that's going to impact negatively for teachers and children. So you mentioned a platform. Does it make sense if we jump in and you can share?
Yeah, I can go through. So basically what we've done at WhatWorked is for the last few years, we've basically been trying to crack getting teachers to run research, particularly trials. And can just check you can see my screen?
Yeah, people can see your screen, yeah.
Biggest barrier, and I'm a former teacher, that you have is time in schools. In that teachers, they don't have the time to pretty much engage with research. And when we've built WhatWorkedTeachers.com, we've built this in mind, and it has to be as straightforward as possible for teachers to be able to test intervention. And also, if you're an EdTech company, having something that's easy for teachers to use to basically to test the impact. You don't want something which is going to be too hard. So on our website, WhatWorkedTeachers.com, we basically have two versions. We've got a public version, which I'll talk you through now. And then we have a private version, which we can set up for EdTech companies. And what that just means is, when your trial is set up and we create it on our platform, we give you a 4-digit access code, which goes in the top corner. And whenever you talk to a school who's potentially interested in helping to test your product, you give them the access code, and then it automatically brings up that trial for that teacher. So it's a private evidence base that you're creating that's not publicly available. So, but what I'll do today is I'll just talk you through the public ones that we've got. And we initially started off just with the MVP, looking to launch just to England and the UK. But Microsoft put a blog post out about Microsoft Reading Progress. And as you can see, we've got quite a few countries where teachers have asked to set up trials in there. So the best thing to do is just when you come on, just go to England, and then it shows you the trials that we have available. Give us 2 seconds. So if I scroll down, we have a demo trial on page 2. And the types of interventions we've got on at the moment for teachers is really straightforward. We've got simple spelling strategies. We've got Microsoft Reading Progress, and we've got peer tutoring. We've got some trials around ChatGPT, which are coming on in the autumn term, around feedback, and we've got a few others that are coming in. But basically all a teacher does is they go on, they click the intervention that they're looking to test. They have a quick read of what peer tutoring is in this example, the evidence behind it. The good thing that we're doing at WhatWorked is we're building a live evidence base. So every single time the pilots are run, we'll be updating in the autumn a cumulative graph that shows how it's working in each of the schools. And then all the teachers do is click sign up. And once they've signed up, it opens a cockpit for the teacher. And we've learned through painful experiences. The first version that we built was just a website with loads of text, and teachers were like, we don't have time to read. The second one that we built was to do with videos. And again, teachers came back and says, we don't have time to watch 2-3 hours worth of video. So we've refined the process down to basically having 3 short videos for the teachers when they get started. So the first video gives them an explanation on how to use the platform. The second one is an overview of how the intervention works, or how the EdTech works. And then the third one is a quick video around how to implement the evaluation and implement this in the classroom. And then all the teachers have to do is download a research protocol, which I'll quickly show you, which gives them a summary of what that research is. We create this for the EdTech company. So it basically goes through what the intervention is, the question that's been answered, the process that we have with the outcome measures, and then the analysis plan. And then all the teachers have to do is then download the resource folder. We are very clear on data protection that we don't take any personal identifying information from learners on here. So it includes an Excel tracker to allow them to link anonymous ID to a learner. And then that's it. They're ready to get started on finding out if this works in their classroom or school. So all the teachers do is they will put their start and final date in for the trial. We tell them how long this takes when it's in the protocol. So generally 6 weeks. We do have some that will last 12 weeks. And then I'll just quickly go on here. We have 2 types of trials. And what this means is for this one, which is peer tutoring, it's a basically individual randomization. So we pull the students out of a classroom for the targeted peer tutoring. So rather than being delivered to all class, this is an intervention where students are pulled out of the class to receive this in addition to what they would get. So all the teacher would do is say, right, I'll use an example. I won't put too many in because I've got to type in data. It's basically, we've got 8 students we're looking to do this with, and then it randomly allocates them into intervention or control. So the teachers just make a log of this on their tracking spreadsheet. And then what the teachers do is they run the pre-test. So what we mean by the pre-assessment is what we outline in the videos for that specific intervention, what the outcome measure is. So for example, with a spelling intervention, we use the government national curriculum guidance on the spelling words that they need to know. If it's Microsoft Reading Progress, it's actually the Reading Progress score that you get. So you run Reading Progress as a baseline, it gives you a score, you just put your score into here, so there's no teacher marking on that. Because we try to keep time to the minimum. For the peer tutoring maths, it's just a quick maths test that they would do, linked to that topic, and then all the teachers do is they put the scores in to the system. So this is the pre-test scores.
So are they all doing the same test?
Yeah, so control intervention, they will all do the same pre-assessment. So if it was reading progress, you would have all the students set a baseline reading task on reading progress. But then for the next 8 weeks, only the students who are using the intervention will continue to use the reading progress. And then at the end of the 8 weeks, all the students again complete that same reading task, which then acts as a post-assessment measure. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, got it.
Fantastic. And then as teachers are great at doing this, they generally run interventions themselves. They're just not researchers. So the teachers at this point in time, they will run that intervention for the duration of that. I am saying teachers, but we've just completed the MVP and we actually had teaching assistants who were running their own RCTs. So we've got basically teachers and teaching assistants doing this. And then once they've run that, they then complete the post-test. So they would put the post-test scores in to the system. And then it's just a simple analyze results. So this, because it's a public trial, is free for any school to use. So they can sign up in September if they want to test a spelling intervention, and it will be free. All they then do is we ask them to fill out a quick process evaluation. And each trial that we set up, we basically use this. It's really useful for the EdTech companies to see the process evaluation because it basically helps identify barriers to implementation that schools are facing. And there's a lot of information we can get from schools. So we have a simple process evaluation, and then all the teachers do is analyze, and then the system generates an impact report for that school. So I'll quickly show you what this looks like. Which is here. It will give you the trial ID. This is just a demo one that I've got on there. The start date, it gives you a summary of the evidence. It then tells you what the effect size is. Ignore that because I just made the data on the spot and how to interpret it. It gives you the descriptive statistics. It then gives you the tables. And right at the very end, it gives you the data that you've put in the system. So we've spoken to a few school improvement advisors recently, and when I've started going out, they're asking, well, what evidence strategies are you using? But they're asking, rather than just refer to the EDF toolkit, what are you actually doing in your school? So what you would have with this case is you'd have the protocol document as well as the actual impact data on how this has worked in the context of your school. So this is what you would just download. And then the last thing you do as a teacher, I just come onto it, come back. Under here is go complete. And then this goes into your My Trial section. So you have a list of all the trials that you've run with the impact reports you can download. But what we're excited about at WhatWorked is every single time a trial is replicated, we get the effect size for that individual replication. So what we're doing is we're adding these together in a cumulative evidence base so that you can build a picture of how this is working. And that's what we do for schools, but we're also excited to be doing this for EdTech, in that it allows EdTech to actually see how this is working across different contexts. and be able to get an idea of how their product's working. So sorry, that was a very quick demo, but it just, I'll stop sharing now, but it just basically gives you an idea of what we're doing at WhatWorked.
I love it. I think it's a no-brainer from an EdTech perspective. I mean, obviously, I've not been a teacher, so but I can see how it'd work in a classroom as well. Couple of questions. So, is the data shared? So, if I'm as an EdTech provider worked with WhatWorked Education, and we roll this out to however many schools using the code, is the data shared publicly?
No, so this is one of the things that we basically do. We have the public trials. So if a trial is on there publicly, then it will be shared because it's a public trial. When it comes to particularly with EdTech, quite often a lot of EdTech companies, they've never looked at evidence before, and it can be quite a scary experience. Actually, robust. This is a robust measure of testing if something actually works. So getting to understand what is the key dosage. A lot of people don't know. This is the best way of implementing. Being able to have a private evidence base just means that the school receives the impact report, but then no one else can see that on the platform. It is basically your evidence base. So you will see how it's working across different schools. The school will see their own, but from an EdTech point of view, it is private. So it's your private evidence base. There is the option later, if you are confident that this is consistently coming back positive and you go, can you turn this public? Then it can be turned public on the system. But it's initially, it starts off private because you want to know as an EdTech company to get an idea, how is this generally working? And then how does it work best? So we have that as a private setting to start with. And then later on, it can be switched in to basically public if the EdTech company wanted to.
Yeah, I can see some. I mean, you'll tell me if this is not appropriate, but I can see some real value in it being used as part of the product development cycle as well.
Definitely, yeah. So a lot of EdTech companies. We've got one of our directors, Kees Mastenbroek, who scaled a huge EdTech company over in Holland, and he's very passionate about EdTech companies basically using this methodology as part of their product development to find out what elements are working well. And then when you know that this is the element that's working well, then this helps you refine your product development. Because if you can prove something's working and then you can give that evidence to schools, then you'll say your product should get more usage because you're backing it up with actually that it's working.
Yeah, and I think that part of the reason that we probably don't use this sort of methodology and this sort of approach in product development is all the other stuff I've seen that does something similar. It tends to be public, so you'd access a grant, and then the data is public. Well, if what you're doing is not working, it's too late. Then you can't iterate your product. Well, you can in a different way, but the damage is done. So.
That's where we fit in. That's where we fit in the edge. If you look at the educational landscape, is the most robust evidence you can ever have is a large scale RCT, and we're not there. We're saying the platform's not for that. It's the stage before. So it's helping you. Most platforms will have literally. You look at reviews. They might have some reviews on. Some might have some case studies. You then start getting a couple that might have some correlational studies, so linking to basically trends. But then some might go into the large-scale RCTs. And if you go to a large-scale publicly funded RCT without fully understanding how this might work, then it does come potentially with a reputational risk. So, and cost-wise, we're a fraction of the cost of what it would cost to run a large-scale RCT. So what we're saying is just literally have a chat with us. We'll show you how we can build something, hopefully a little bit lighter touch.
Yeah, I think we need to have a chat off of the podcast. I think you mentioned having a chat with you. Where's the best place to find yourself? So people are watching this. I can see people watching this. If there's anyone who's interested in having a conversation, what's the best way to go about that?
WhatWorked Education. So you can go to WhatWorked Education. So WhatWorked.education as our website. There's a contact form there, or I'm more than happy for my email address is wayne.harrison@whatworked.education. You're more than happy to reach out to me through that. Follow us on socials. We often have clients who will contact us through LinkedIn. Basically, they'll go to WhatWorked. If you type in WhatWorked Education, Twitter handles WhatWorked. There probably you can DM us. We can jump on. We always like to have a coffee, which is one of the things, just to hear about products. So even if it's just a case of, can we jump on for a quick 30-minute coffee, tell us about your product, and if you've got any questions about how you could potentially do that. We do have free courses on our website as well, which is for EdTech, designed around evidence. So if you were wondering what's the difference between a quasi-experimental and an RCT, then yeah, we basically break it down into short videos to explain, and that's free for EdTech on our website, WhatWorked.com. WhatWorked Education.
Amazing. They're like gold dust, those .education email addresses. I used to web addresses. I used to have one as well.
But they get blocked in some schools, believe it or not. So I've actually got WhatWorked Education, and I've got an email set up for co.uk because for some schools they just don't like that .education, and but we are there.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's cool. So I usually wrap these up by, and I know we briefly had a really quick conversation before because we've not touched base much, have we, since we penciled this in. But I usually ask everyone who's watching one book or podcast that you'd recommend and why. And I know you might have a couple, and everybody
I've got
has more than
two.
one.
Yeah. So from a research point of view, when I started, because I was a teacher and I knew nothing on research, and I was very fortunate to start an MA. And one of the books that I read on there, and I always have it behind, it's on my bookcase, which is Research Design, which is basically creating robust approaches for social sciences by Professor Stephen Gorard. If you are ever interested in trying to get your head around research, that is nice. It's not a big book. Some of them are huge. It's a book that you can cover off quite quickly, and it goes into, it's all the key things that you need to think about, such as sample size, your outcome measures, the research cycle. It's a good general overview of research. And then I was mentioning I'm in a book club. So I'm in a book club every single month. I've been in one for the last few years. And the first book that I ever covered in that's probably the one that stuck most with me. And it was No Rules by Reed Hastings, which is pretty much around the story of Netflix. And it's all around innovation. And it's about how to be disruptive. And that stuck with me because with WhatWorked, we're trying to be disruptive in this space. And when you look at the Netflix and how they've gone about it, it's a fantastic book. So that's the two that I would recommend you.
They really did disrupt as well, didn't they? My wife worked at Blockbuster when I first started dating her.
But they tried to sell it to Blockbuster, and Blockbuster turned them down. And it's fascinating there. But just the whole culture around innovation and how they see innovation is how to be disruptive. That was one of the books that I'll say read it. I use Audible for the book club because I basically fit into schedule. So, but yeah, that was one of the first ones that I listened to on there, and I'd highly recommend for anyone who's in education, EdTech, and thinking about being disruptive to listen to or read that book.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I found that really useful, Wayne, and I'll be honest, I'd challenge anyone to find a better way of putting research or building research into what they're doing from an EdTech perspective. It's not something I've ever been able to do. It always felt a little bit out of my reach, and it feels like you guys, without bringing someone in-house who've got that expertise, but it's not a role you'll very often find in an EdTech business. So I'd definitely recommend people reach out to you. We'll have another conversation after this. Is there anything else you want to add before we say thanks and bye?
No, that's it. And just the one thing that I'll add is for the actual evidence platform, you can link to it through our main one, but it's whatworkedteachers.com. And the reason why it's WhatWorked Teachers is because we're building evidence in schools, which is what EdTech want to do. So that's why it's whatworkedteachers.com, but we have that as a private setting for EdTech to use. So yeah, that's our main websites.
I'll watch this back and I'll put all the links in the comments and stuff as well. So all that leaves me to do is remind everyone that the best way you can support what I'm trying to do here, connecting educators and EdTech businesses, is to subscribe, share, repost, comment, tell everyone about what it is we're doing. And then just say thanks everyone for listening. I know it's a nice sunny day outside, and I can see some of you are either in the garden watching on your phone or listening on your phone, or you like me in the office, unfortunately. And like you as well, Wayne. I know you're in the office as well. So thanks for taking the time to watch. Have a good evening, everyone. And thanks, Wayne. I've found